a whole bunch of other organizations is called Growing Together Connecticut. And I'm here with Sam Giffin, who's our policy and data analyst. And interestingly, Sam and I are both originally from Washington, D.C. In fact, we grew up not very far from each other, and we went to the same junior high school and high school, which is kind of unexpected. But we both attended the DC public schools, which meant that, you know, and this is only as much as it's worth. This isn't worth nearly everything. But you know, our schools were at the high school level, predominantly kids of color, which doesn't mean that we know what it is to be a person of color, but at least for me, it really shaped my interests in terms of my career and, you know, my perception of the world. So it was an amazing experience. And I was able to have a great group of friends from all kinds of different backgrounds. It was also an experience that made it very clear that there were lots of inequities, both in terms of my own experience in school, but to an even greater extent for some of my classmates, and particularly classmates who were students of color and who came from higher poverty backgrounds. One thing actually, before we get going, could you guys could we go around and could you just tell me where in Connecticut you are? I'd love to understand the different geographies here.
I'm from New York City, but I live full-time in Bethlehem now as of May 2020. And before the pandemic, I was already on the vestry at Christ Church in town in Bethlehem. And then I'm thinking that maybe it was during the pandemic that, yes, that's right, because our priest is quarter time, and there was a reminder, or a decision I should say, that he should have, in his case it's a he, one Sunday off a month. So I'm also a lay minister.
Oh, fantastic.
So, and then I've been involved in the Northwest Corner leadership for a while too, with Dylan, because I became involved in food ministries as part of being full-time in Bethlehem and becoming aware of the really terrifying lack of food that was kicking in because of the pandemic while people were out of work and children were home from school, so they weren't getting their breakfasts and their lunches. And so, yeah, so it was I still do some of that now, and I adore it.
I'm forgetting the name of the abbey that is in Bethlehem.
Regina Lawless.
Yes, my husband is a cheesemaker. He and his family have a farm in Colchester and have done, you know, over the years, you know, work with Sister Noella, who was a very famous cheesemaker at the abbey.
He sure is. Yeah, yeah. Now, your husband doesn't make the woman-shago cheese, does he?
Yes, he does. Yes.
Oh my gosh. I cannot wait to tell my college girlfriends, because we're like, we have to find the woman-shago cheese.
All right, I'll get you all the information.
Yeah. Oh, that's so exciting. I can't wait to tell them. Thank you. Sorry, everybody. That's a major diversion from the topic. But when you said Colchester, I'm like, is it possible? This is the source of woman-shago cheese. Okay, back to work, everybody. Sorry about that.
I'll just shout out Sharon's name just to move it around.
Sure. Sharon Ely Pearson. I live in Norwalk, Connecticut. I worship at St. Matthew's in Wilton. So just between those two places, it's very different. And the topic for this evening really spoke to me because I'm the convener of our social justice and racial healing group at the parish that we meet monthly. And we've been doing a variety of things and really trying to connect with what's going on local and support all of that in a lot of different ways. So good to be here.
Great. And Brenda?
Hi, I'm with my husband Gary here. We are joining you from Madison, Connecticut, and we're parishioners at St. Andrews. And we're great fans of Women Together Cheese, so that's exciting to hear as well. And we're both involved with a racial healing and social justice ministry at St. Andrews, fairly newly formed ministry. It came out of a book group that began during the pandemic, and where we started to look at building awareness together. Now we're starting to look for ways to really move forward and take action. And one of the topics that keeps coming up for us is affordable housing. As you can imagine, that's something that there's very, very little of in Madison, Connecticut, if you're familiar with the area. So we're here to learn more.
All right, let's see, who haven't we gotten to yet? Diane.
Hi, I'm Diane Hayes. I'm from New Hartford and go to St. John's Pine Meadow. I am involved in our food ministry. We have a 24/7 pantry. And I also have been running a thrift store in Winstead that is a nonprofit. All proceeds go to local charities. And we supply goods for people who can't afford stuff in a regular store.
Great. Great work. Wow. And Ellen.
I'm Ellen Adams. I say that I sleep in Norwich, but live in New London because most of my work is in New London. So I'm the deacon at St. James, New London, and active at St. Francis House, which has a peace and justice component, and spending a lot of time with land trusts through that. And I'm also active in prison ministry and helped run a housing for women coming out of York until the pandemic, when we had to stop because we couldn't go in and interview.
Wow. Amazing work. Everyone does amazing work. This is incredible. Andreas.
Okay, Andreas, Andy, please. Thank you for hosting us tonight. I'm a longtime parishioner at St. Paul's in Riverside, Connecticut. 30 years, a couple stints on the vestry, a couple search committees over the 3 decades, served as treasurer for about 8 years. But the reason I'm on this call tonight, this is a topic that's very pertinent and very timely for our town. Riverside is a section of Greenwich, which I think a lot of people have heard of. And a lot of people have a misunderstanding of the town. We have a surprisingly large number of people who are on the edge. We have a high Alice ratio, and it's anyway, it's very topical, and I'm glad you guys have teed up this conversation. I'm looking forward to it. By the way, I apologize in advance. I can't stay too long, so I'll be probably signing off about 20 minutes.
Okay,
sorry about that.
Great. We'll try to get all the information out before then. And I should actually mention, I grew up in the Episcopal Church. I went to, in DC, I went to St. Columbus, which is in Northwest DC, not far from where Sam actually grew up. So, all right, well, with that, I will just pop up a little presentation and we'll go through it and try to get as much in as we can relatively quickly so that we can just have a nice conversation. And I think, I don't know, it looks like it's not letting me share for some reason, which is weird. Let me just try one more time. There we go. Okay, we're good. All right, can you see my screen okay? Yeah, all right, good. So Growing Together is this effort that we put together with a whole bunch of other partners. Our steering committee includes, in addition to our organization, Open Communities Alliance, the Connecticut Fair Housing Center, the Commission, on Human Rights and Opportunities, the Corporation for Supportive Housing, CONCAN, which is an educational equity group, the Hispanic Federation, and the one group that we'll be announcing as a new member next week is the NAACP of Connecticut. So we're really excited to have them on board. Open Communities Alliance is an organization that I founded in 2013 to really address the fact that Connecticut is one of the most segregated states in the country, and try to bring together a whole bunch of tools, including organizing research and data, and where need be, litigation, advocacy, including litigation, to get done what needs to get done, which often is the case with lots of civil rights work. And then we have lots of other partners in this work, and it's expanding. And one area we'd love to expand into is into faith-based organizations. I think that's going to be such a powerful force on getting this work done all across the state. We have worked in different ways with some other faith-based organizing efforts that are going on around the state, including Connect and GIA, which some of you may have heard of. And because they do their organizing in a way that's really grounded in a decision by each congregation about priorities, we're sort of coming at it in two directions. Like, we're trying to reach out to congregations so they get to the point where they can be supportive of these initiatives, and then that filters into what Connect and GIA are doing. So Growing Together is really focused on two big things. We're trying to address the fact that there are lots of communities in the state that are under-resourced, and there need to be efforts to reinvest and revitalize. And then the second piece is that there are also lots of communities that are out of reach for lower income families, among whom are families who are disproportionately Black and Latino. I say it in that way because, of course, we know there are lots of other households that also desperately need affordable housing, from seniors to households who have a member with disabilities, from single parent to single parent households. So it really runs the gamut, but we come to this from a racial justice framework. And to get it done this year, what we're centering as our proposal is something called Fair Share Planning and Zoning. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So I think this fits in incredibly well with what those of you who are on the last call learned about or got more information about, which is income disparities that track to race and ethnicity. But part of that is the fact that Connecticut is one of the most housing burdened states in the country. So we have the 10th highest housing wage, meaning that a family that's earning minimum wage would have to work for 91 hours a week in order to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. We've done research in partnership with an expert who's affiliated with Princeton University, showing that the state is missing around 120, more than 120,000 units of affordable housing. Paired with this is a segregation crisis. We're one of the most segregated states in the country. We're more segregated than basically any place in the South. Those reddish, brownish shaded areas are places that are in the top 10% of segregation. And you can see that there's a real distinction between what's going on in the Connecticut and sort of New York, Philadelphia area, Detroit, Los Angeles, and then lots of other parts of the country. To really dig into this, we do something called opportunity mapping. And this is a process of taking a series of data points that connect through all kinds of social science literature to outcomes, particularly for kids. And it looks at how those different data points are faring in different census tracts. So on this map, the areas that are dark orange are places that have a lot of positives. And some of the data points are things like how the schools are doing, what the crime rates are, what the home ownership rates are, if there are jobs nearby, if jobs are growing. And by all those measures, you see places like Glastonbury and Avon and Woodbridge and North Haven, places are really doing well. And those are the dark orange across a scale of 5 levels, all the way to what we call very low opportunity areas. And these are places that need deeper investment. And they're, I think, what a lot of us would expect if you've been in Connecticut for a while: Hartford, New Britain, Waterbury, New Haven, etc. What's helpful about these maps is all they include is the core data right now. They don't have any information about race or ethnicity, of the people who live in the different census tracts. And so it allows us to sort of, for a moment, remove some of the stereotypes that might come along and people impose on neighborhoods to an extent. I mean, you could also argue there's a certain amount of bias that even comes with the data that we ended up choosing. But putting that aside for a moment, we can map this with other things now. And so one of the things we can map this with is where families of color are living. And so you can see there's a real correlation between areas that are disinvested, have fewer opportunity assets, and where families of color are living right now. So just to sort of put a fine point on it, if you look at those very high, and moderate opportunity areas across the state, about 75% of white households are living there. If you look at those low and very low opportunity areas, it's where about 74% of Black households are living, and half almost of Black households are living in the only 3% of the land area of the state that we've assessed as being very low opportunity. So when we talk about Connecticut being segregated, this is what we're talking about. And then you layer on with that, it's a segregation that connects to whether people have access to opportunity. These kinds of patterns, along with other things like, mass incarceration and discrimination in employment, all come into play when we look at the disparities in wealth and income. So in Connecticut, as you guys talked about last time, Black and Latino households are earning on average about half or less of what white households are earning, and have about 1/10 of the wealth. And in this Forbes study, the estimate was that by 2024, that 10% of wealth was going to go below, to more like 1%. So really a big deal when you think about what kind of housing you can afford. And whether you're going to be in a position to become a homeowner. All of these things sort of coalesce to create less wealth among Black and Latino households. I imagine many of you, given all the work you're doing, are well aware of how we got here in terms of the history of government policies that intentionally fostered segregation. Redlining is one example. And as I imagine that was a process starting in 1937, where the federal government was getting into the business of making home loans. They decided they needed to rate the stability of neighborhoods before they made those loans. And one of the factors, they used a bunch of factors to determine whether a neighborhood was stable or not. One of them was the race and ethnicity of the folks who lived there. And so those areas were literally redlined if there was a high Black or immigrant population, and loans were not made there. So these kinds of things play out through history and meant that wealth was, in a real sense, stripped from neighborhoods that were predominantly of color, and that there were not a lot of options to move elsewhere for Black and Latino families. So to get ourselves out of this, we feel that the government got us into this. The government needs to help us get out of it. And we need to do two things. We need to make sure that there are equitable, community-driven investments going into communities that have been disinvested from for decades. And we need to make sure there are genuine choices for affordable housing in places, everywhere across the state, including places that haven't had them for a very long time. So on the equitable revitalization piece, Growing Together is working with a whole bunch of groups that have done this kind of work for a really long time. We have a committee that is leading up this piece of it, that is chaired by Karen Du Bois Walton, who's the head of the Housing Authority in New Haven, and a woman named Melinda Johnson, who's at the YWCA in Hartford, who are just both complete rock stars and leading us through this process, which will really begin with a deep community engagement piece over the first few months. So that's step one. We imagine a lot of those efforts, and given all the work I've heard that lots of you are doing, you will probably have some insights into this once that process gets going, and we'd love to hear from you. We imagine that the buckets that the needs will fall into will look like community wealth creation, and that means investments in land trusts. It means promoting home ownership, rental housing supports, like investing in more affordable housing, investing to improve the quality of current affordable housing, and looking at how to remove environmental hazards, and then community building strategies like placemaking, parks, playgrounds, brownfield remediation, and investing in public transit. So that's the sort of equitable revitalization bucket. And then I'm going to stop there and hand it to Sam to cover the rest.
Erin, share my screen. All right. Do you see the same
Yep.
slide that Erin was on? Great.
Yep.
All right. So the other half of Growing Together CT is a policy that we've been thinking about at OCA for many, many years. And we call it Fair Share Planning and Zoning. Part of the this half of the framework is a bit of a shift in how Connecticut has thought about housing for a long time. So it's a kind of a paradigm change. Essentially, what Fair Share is a policy that sets out a goal for each town to build its responsibility in affordable housing units according to how much need there is in the region. And then towns are given the onus to plan, to do their planning and zoning to accommodate that much housing. And then, of course, part of the one of the critical aspects is that it is enforceable. So the neat part about this, especially in the Connecticut context, or one of the many strategic but important considerations that we made in focusing on this policy in Connecticut. There's a constant refrain we hear from towns and in the state legislature and debate about affordable housing. You'll often hear, this policy or that policy is taking away local control. And notwithstanding those arguments about other policies, Fair Share is designed so that towns have the steering wheel, as it were, in order to choose their destiny in terms of how they achieve their fair share. Critically, it does not allow towns to choose their fair share or say, we don't want to do it at all. Because I think, as experience may have shown, that would happen in a number of places in Connecticut. So there's a laundry list of different tools, policies, programs that can be used to bring about a town's fair share. They can make choices about how much density, the location, within reason, within certain parameters that make sure that it's responsible. But it really gives towns a lot of leeway, which is a selling point, and kind of hopefully gets us out of this local control issue. Another thing that Fair Share is a framework that's borrowed from the huge success in New Jersey. Fair Share arose out of a really huge, important court case in New Jersey many, many decades ago. But what we can learn from it is that this framework works, and it actually produces housing units. So this is a slightly outdated graph. They don't really have the best, data keeping apparatus in the New Jersey Affordable Housing Department, but we know that they've built at least about 70,000 affordable housing units in the last, over the several decades that Fair Share has been in place. And extrapolating their experience to what might happen in Connecticut with the needs that we've calculated in our Fair Share model, that could look like about 160,000 market rate units, about 120,000 or 30,000 affordable units for the state of Connecticut in the next 10 years. And this is something that we always put at the front of, or the, at least the front half of the slideshow, because this is when we're talking to people like you who care deeply about racial justice, who work for it. We don't have to convince you that this is the right thing. But there are many people who perhaps are going to be more convinced by, quantitative arguments, especially in terms of the economic impact. So we like to show that this is an absolute win-win. Not only is it the right thing to do for obvious racial justice reasons, but also it is very much the smart thing to do for our economy. So there's a Connecticut National Association of Home Builders report estimating the impact of just building multifamily housing units. Generic multifamily, it has a lot of assumptions and averages to estimate what an average multifamily unit looks like. But the economic impact of just building multifamily housing, period, is really massive. So you have the building permit fees, you have the construction itself, you have the entire supply chain, parts of which touched various pieces of the Connecticut economy. You have the income from that construction, whether it's done by local workers or a local company. You have that income being spent in the local economy. And then you have the annual recurring impacts. So not only the property taxes that are paid every year, but those jobs being spent in the local economy, the people who live there spending their money there, maybe perhaps they moved from somewhere else. So the report, short and simple, estimates that this amount of housing through Fair Share would result in many, many billions of dollars for our state economy, for state and local governments in terms of revenue. And so again, this is just something that we like to lead with for the folks that aren't already brought on board by the racial justice arguments. That doesn't even include the affordable housing impact, or sort of the economic impact of the affordable units. So, constructing affordable units is still very expensive, and just like constructing any unit. So that's a lot of construction money that goes into the economy, and the people that live there. Not only are they spending their money in the local economy, but they're also not spending more than they can, because more than they can on housing. So they have more discretionary income. Also, a lot of these affordable units are going to leverage state and federal subsidies, which means money that would never have been in that town in the first place without those affordable units. So we know that it would be the right thing to do racially and for economic justice. And we know that it would lead to a huge benefit for our economy. It's also important to note that this is the law. So, the State Zoning Enabling Act allows towns the power to zone. So the state has the power to zone. And without this Zoning Enabling Act, towns would not have that power. So within the Zoning Enabling Act, aka 8-2, the state provides some stipulations for what towns are supposed to do when they create their zoning. Among those are encouraging the development of multifamily. and meeting the regional need, not just for those who live in the town, but meeting the need regionally for low and moderate income families. We also have a somewhat unique constitution, state constitution, which actually prohibits segregating policies. So these very much point in favor of a fair share framework. Unfortunately, we believe that the reason we need fair share, or something like fair share, something systemic that really gets at the heart of the affordable housing issues, are because towns are not following the letter or the spirit of the law necessarily. So I've spent the last couple of years now deeply investigating a few dozen towns' planning and zoning documents to look for examples of encouraging or discouraging affordable or multifamily housing. And this is it's really fun, I promise. If you've ever taken a look at your own zoning regulation, I think the longest one I saw, it might have been where one of you live. I think it might have been Madison or something. I can't remember exactly. Maybe it was Stonington. 368 pages, I think. And it's mostly illegible to the layperson. But importantly, what we found were massive impediments to building any kind of housing that would increase affordability. So that's typically your denser, your lower cost housing. Just building more units on a similar piece of land means that the land cost, which is often high in Connecticut, is going to be distributed amongst more units. So it's just cheaper to build. It's also cheaper for the consumer. So it's more affordable. That said, we also, when we were building affordable housing, we need to have higher density multifamily housing to be able to utilize subsidies typically that that allow affordable housing. And above all, a lot of this is built through inclusionary zoning. So you have a market rate building that sets aside a certain percentage of the units to be affordable. Well, that's not going to happen as easily unless you have a lot of density. So they can fit a lot of market rate units to essentially subsidize the affordable units. I'm going to pick on Orange because it's really a cut and dry map of their zoning. And so basically what you see, the yellowish, the light yellowish color is the vast majority of the town's land area, and it requires approximately a football field of land to build a single home. And for all the reasons I just described, that really makes housing unaffordable. And it also makes it impossible to increase the density to a degree that you can lower general affordability or lower costs generally. I remember someone said they were from Madison. Some of the policies are really in direct contravention of some of the laws that I cited previously. So Madison, which is predominantly non-Hispanic white, extremely so, really favors existing residents of that town in consideration for affordable housing. And it's hard to see how that would ever have a desegregative effect in Madison. So getting down to sort of the brass tacks of the policy, what it is, what it does. So fair share starts with the need for affordable housing. Basically, we need the number. We need to figure out how much affordable housing the state needs. We also need to do that by region. So make sure we're listening to the Connecticut Zoning Enabling Act, which says we need to meet the regional need, not just of the towns, of the residents of the town we live in. Then we need to allocate that. Step 2 is to allocate that regional need to towns. And this is where the fair comes in a way that's responsible, but also represents the capacity or responsibility of towns to accommodate affordable housing. Step 3 is where the town gets to do it. They get to go and take their planning and zoning documents and rewrite them and make policy changes where they need to, and consult with planning experts and with housing specialists and developers, and go reach out to affordable housing developers, figure out how they want to achieve that goal. And finally, the state needs to have some level of enforceability and can potentially also use incentives to get there. But none of this is going to happen, as we have seen over the decades and decades in Connecticut and some towns, without an actual stake. So that is a critical piece of this legislation as well. The first step, there's a number of ways to think about need. How much affordable housing do we need? So affordability is typically defined as a household that doesn't have to pay more than a third of its income towards housing costs. And that's pretty rough. But that's extremely high in Connecticut, the number of households that actually are doing that, almost 500,000 households in Connecticut. So over a third of Connecticut households are paying more than a third of their household income towards housing. Now, we're not terribly concerned about the millionaire that's spending more than a third of their income on housing. But when we go down the income spectrum and start to look at those households below 80% of the area median income, below 50%, and down to below 30%, which is considered extremely low income, still extremely high numbers. So there are over 135,000 households that are making less than about $30,000 a year for a family of four, even less for a single person, and they're paying more than half of their income towards housing costs. So this is a extreme level of housing need, and yet we're using this conservative definition of our affordable housing need because this is an extremely high number for Connecticut, and Connecticut has not historically built a tremendous amount of housing, period, much less affordable housing. So this is a good place to start and a good 10-year goal for our state. Now the fair part. So how do we allocate? We have this need, and you can see each region is, we determine the number of those households that are extremely low income and paying more than half of their income towards housing costs in each region. And we've combined metropolitan and Western region because the metropolitan region really didn't make much sense at all. It seemed like it was drawn out of the metropolitan region, or sorry, drawn out of the Western Council of Government region to exclude Bridgeport. And we think it makes a lot more sense like it is now, combined with the Western. But within each of those regions, and you can think of these as sort of, yeah, they're metropolitan areas, they're commuting areas, so they make sense as economic units. Within these areas, towns that have higher income and that have higher wealth should have a higher fair share. They are able to create, to accommodate more affordable housing, and in all likelihood, they were the beneficiaries of segregation in the past, and perhaps got to that wealth and income through exclusion. Now we go back to our Zoning Enabling Act and what it tells towns to do in zoning. Towns with lower levels of multifamily housing existing, and towns with lower socioeconomic diversity, so poverty level, they haven't historically done enough to encourage multifamily housing or economic diversity as the law tells us to do. So they should also have a higher fair share. So each of these principles ties to Connecticut law and also the planning principle of the capacity to accommodate housing. This was the first iteration of our fair share model calculated, and this is roughly what it would probably look like today, but data has been updated. And whenever we do this presentation to a different place, we always like to throw in that town if we're we're doing it, but didn't have time to do that this weekend. So all of this is available at our website, ctoca.org/fairshare. But you can see the darker areas, the areas with higher, and maybe I should have included the regional captors, because you can really see that within regions, the darker areas are kind of similar to the dark orange areas in the opportunity map. They're places with a lot of income and wealth, great schools, low crime, high home ownership rates, and they're going to have a higher burden of that fair share. So there are a couple other, this is really getting in the weeds of it, but it's actually critical to make sure that any housing produced under this model actually gives people of color and low-income people a chance to move to an opportunity area. Towns are not able to only build home ownership because it doesn't reach the lowest incomes. Towns can't only build age-restricted housing because there's an enormous need for family housing and also access to great schools for low-income families with kids. For that reason, we also need to have ensure that there are 2, 3, 4 bedroom units, not all studios, as sometimes we see with other policies. Affirmative marketing is going to be critical. And in towns that have, like someone mentioned Greenwich, towns that have areas of extreme wealth and extreme poverty within the same town, there's often a push to continue to put all the affordable housing in that one very poor place within the town. And that would not be allowed under fair share. So I mentioned before, but New Jersey has produced an incredible amount of housing already, and it's at an escalating pace. So over 300 towns have actually produced a fair share plan. So the 170,000 units that have already been created is about to get a lot bigger because those plans are coming into effect in the next 5 or 10 years. And we expect another 100,000 market rate units and another 50,000 affordable units. And this is certainly a correlation and not causation, but we just like to show how New Jersey has changed. And this is using a measure of diversity and segregation. But you can see that in 1990, New Jersey was almost entirely low diversity, white majority census tracts. Almost nowhere was there any moderate diversity. There are a few somewhat rural, moderate density, white majority tracts. But as this housing starts to be produced, we can only conjecture that that has really helped these moderate diversity Black majority areas to grow, these moderate diversity white majority areas, and you start to see your first high diversity census tracts in New Jersey. And then that continues to grow. So we see moderate diversity neighborhoods of a white majority, Black majority, Latino majority, and Asian majority, and also more and more high diversity areas. So it's looking like almost maybe less than just about half is still low diversity white majority in New Jersey still. So that is sort of a hopeful picture. And again, we can't say that that's because of fair share, but I think anyone who does this kind of work kind of understands that that is pretty meaningful and pretty significant. So that's the end of sort of the high level this introduction to the policy. And I think we would just love to have a conversation now and hear what you all have to think about it, hear all your questions, and take it away. I'll stop sharing.
And Rowena, yes, Connie Royster says hello.
I could just do it again if you want to.
Pleasure.
I have a question. This is Diane Hayes. Living in a very rural area where most housing has their own septic systems, have any towns found a solution for higher density when you have to have your own wells and septic systems?
Yeah, I mean, there are sort of two pieces to that. One is, the extent to which towns have made a plan to never expand their sewers in order to not have affordable housing and other development. So I think one thing that if we adopted fair share, we would start to see is some additional, already there's going to be lots of money coming from the federal government, like really soon, that could be invested in that kind of thing. But then you would also see the state starting to put money out there because the towns would be advocating for it. And of course, if we could really do that piece right, it'd be so good for the environment. The kind of sprawl that comes along with needing to have a football field for every house is crazy. Like, that doesn't make any sense from like a million different ways when you think about the environment. So that's one piece. Another piece is there actually are what are called community septic systems, which are sort of small scale septic that can be used for multifamily housing, even in places that don't have sewer. They cost some money. Developers are often sort of gun shy about them because they add an additional expense. They'd much prefer to be on sewer, but they work and you can do it that way. You also can do things where you have small scale multifamily housing, like under 6 units on a piece of land that is zoned for a single family home. And the environmental footprint is not going to be any greater than if you had a family living in that house. And, Sam's actually the planner here. So Sam, I don't know if you want to kick in, add any other responses.
I think those are great points. And it is a great question. I think one thing that generally happens is that when a town wants to oppose an affordable housing development, the arguments come out of the woodwork, and the environment is one that we're supposed to listen to, and it's especially compelling, I think, to a lot of people. But zoning is one body of regulation, and public health and ecological regulation is another completely separate body of regulation, which regulates all of these buildings. So zoning commissions are not typically experts in the ecological impacts. And so I would say in general, there's nothing to worry about because these buildings will be regulated by public health, by Department of Environmental Protection, et cetera. Just, from anecdotally and from professional experience, the numbers that people get scared about in terms of density are pretty laughable when you think about what is actually possible without sewer. So we recently hired a planner to take a look at Glastonbury and think about what kind of policies they would put in place to get Glastonbury towards its fair share. One idea was soil-based zoning, which simply means take all of the arbitrary zoning reasons out of the equation and simply zone for the density that the ecology can permit. So it's as simple as that. Why are we coming up with 10,000 or some fraction of an acre when we could just say, what does the ecology permit? But also, within these community septic systems, the soils really do dictate what happens. And so you'll have one zone that allows one family on 1 acre. And that might make sense for this piece of land, and it doesn't make sense for this piece of land. I think an example that I like to cite I think it's in Essex, and it's a 53 unit multifamily building on 3 acres, and it's on community septic. So I can't do the math in my head, but it's a lot of units per acre, more than anyone I think typically thinks of off sewer. But it really all depends on what these technical experts do all day at their job. So I think there's so much potential throughout the state.
That's great. That's really great. That's a great ideas to just change the mindset. That's really good. Thanks.
Well, that's part of the reason we wanted to do this report to begin with, just in terms of mindset shifting. We haven't really known how much affordable housing we need. So it's been hard to plan to get it done if we don't know where to start. And then it's hard to set goals for towns. And, I think many of us, when we're trying to get something done, we want to know where we're trying to go, and then we can plan around that. And I think that's really true for the whole state and towns around the state.
I have a question, but I'm not sure how to frame it, or but I guess I have a big overarching question. Considering I'm here, as an individual for one, but I'm also sort of representing my faith community to share some of this with them. So what do you envision, or for faith communities to be in partnership with you? So how would that work?
Well, we actually this year have a bill, and I'm not jumping to this as an action point at this point, because it's coming up on Thursday. But it's a bill that we imagine it's a big deal. It's this fair share proposal. It's sort of a light version of what Sam just talked about, because some of those details aren't there. Some of them are, we don't say, here's what the enforcement will look like. The bill says, and OPM will come up with make recommendations on enforcement. So maybe that'll get passed this year. I sort of doubt it, just because it's a short session, and it's an election year, and there's sort of a lot of other factors running around. But we're using this as a public education and outreach moment that we really think of as something that needs to be ongoing over multiple years. So the opportunity to come and speak with congregations about this concept, get feedback, get input, and then sort of take it back and wrap it into what we might propose next year is a really important part of the process. And we'd love the opportunity to do that if that made sense with where your congregation is.
I'd sort of a follow-up then. I wonder if you have talking points, or you could, sort of prep people to be able to speak to their planning and zoning commissions. I know, I would not know where to start, who am I to do that? But I know there's the power of, just showing up and asking a question to plant some seeds in people's minds. So are there ways that, you can all help those of us on the grassroots level kind of figure out what's the best approach, knowing my own example of my own planning and zoning commission is a hotbed of all kinds of stuff. And with them.
This probably happens in lots of places. Having been in Connecticut for 20 years, I feel like this really is probably true everywhere, but it's so insighty, right? Like we had a case, it was actually against the town of New London years ago when I was working at the ACLU, and we had to take depositions of all the zoning commission because they wouldn't let a facility for people with psychiatric disabilities move from one part of town to another part of town. And during those depositions, we found out everybody's related to each other. Everybody's grandfather had previously been on the zoning commission. One guy in the law offices where the deposition was taking place, he stops the deposition. He says, "I was born in this room," and it had been a doctor's office before that. So it does get very inciting, and I think that could be to our benefit if we can really have a chance to talk to people and change some hearts and minds as we move along. What we have done in a couple of towns in Connecticut, and I think the place where we're the furthest along is in Glastonbury, is we've worked very closely with community groups and faith groups to train people up on all of these issues, and then actually start to influence the planning and zoning process in the town. There was a hearing on the affordable housing plan that Glastonbury has drafted, and I would say 85% of the people who testified at the hearing testified in favor of changes that were along the lines of fair share. And it's because we've been partnering with them, and that we've got some really committed people on the ground here, and they put the time in, and it was fantastic. And so that's the kind of thing. We have lots of materials, and we would be really happy to do that. The other thing that we've spoken with Dylan about is we're trying to grow out what we call our town ambassador program, which is, can we find 2 or 3 people in each town who can kind of just be the folks leading this, keeping a watch on what's going on with the zoning commission, letting us know when there are proposals up. It's because of that insidey nature of things, it's hard to get a sense of when these things are happening, and having folks on the ground in each town is one of the ways to do that. So if that's something that's interesting to anyone here, or folks who might be, that's the kind of thing we're really looking for.
Thanks, that's helpful.
And I know we talked for a long time, and I'm not sure how much time everyone has set aside for this. So I'm happy to stay and keep talking, but I didn't know if this was a 6:30, 7:30 thing or not. So Dylan, whatever you recommend.
Yeah, I think I put maybe 8 on the thing, but whenever the conversation.
Okay, great. Yeah.
I figure we know where the energy's at. Yeah. No, this is super helpful and informative, and I really love the presentation. Yeah, I think really one of the big things is education for like a lot of the people, and it's just how to go about, or at least the people that we connect with, and how do we go about best doing that. I mean, Sharon touched upon that, and you touched upon that too, and I think it's just kind of building that momentum in some of our cases, because a lot of people I don't think are even aware of what's going on, and so that's like another, like, even whether you're whatever side you're on, I think just making aware is one of the things too to kind of start with for us, or for me. So
definitely.
And I would just add, you don't need to be an expert in planning and zoning to be able to make a compelling argument to a loved one or a friend, or just an acquaintance in your town. I think a lot of the opposition to affordable housing, it may sound sophisticated, like using septic and sewer and traffic, vehicle miles traveled, and that kind of thing. But I think what everyone can do is recognize how deep of a social justice issue this is, how deeply segregated Connecticut is, and just sit with that. And I think if you express that to someone, and if they actually listen, then traffic considerations might seem a little bit less salient. Or so yeah, I mean, I give yourself some credit that you really can actually be powerful in your spheres of influence.
when it comes to this kind of ambassador program, are there any towns that are like really like moving forward on that? Like that would be like frames. I mean, we're all from different towns here. I'm just kind of curious where some of that energy might be currently.
Yeah, I think the places where we have the most traction are in, and this is a new program, and our outreach person just left to take a great job, and we're bringing on a new organizer. So we're sort of in a moment of pause, but Glastonbury West Hartford, Hamden are all places where we've seen a lot of activity. Woodbridge too. So those are a couple towns. If you know folks there, that's where things have been pretty active.
I was just Googling like the soil-based zoning, and I found that Washington and Kent have soil-based zoning. Have you seen any change because of that?
That would be a really interesting question to look into that. There may be other impediments. I haven't actually looked into Washington or Kent. We tend to focus on sort of inner ring suburbs and high population centers. And but that is a really great question. I think my gut would be that there are impediments beyond just the soil density that might be prohibiting. If there is an impediment to affordable housing, I think it maybe go beyond soil-based zoning. And that's that brings up another point, which I think is really critical. There are some attempts to just say, well, what if we just said everyone had to do this? And I think that not only falls into the trap of, they're taking away our local control, one size fits all rhetoric, but also if everyone just did this, then everyone would find a unique way to get around this, whatever this is. So I really think that fair share is beautiful because it says, here's what you have to do, and we don't care how you do it.
Yeah, I was just looking, trying, if I was going to go to the zoning commission, sort of arm myself with, here's a town that looks like our town, and here's what they've been able to do. And that's the kind of information I think I would like to be able to be armed with to go into, having discussions with the zoning board.
Well,
Yeah,
it is nice.
No, go ahead, Sam. No, go ahead.
Well, it's nice for us to be able to say Washington and Kent did it and the sky didn't fall there. So there's no reason you should be so opposed to it. But I mean, you make a good point.
No, and it's very nice to say that, but it's also hard in Connecticut because we have so many towns that are doing it wrong that sometimes we're a little hard pressed to come up with some of the towns that are doing it right. We can sometimes, but it gets pretty hard. And I think again, that's partly why fair share has appeal, is because, and this is what's actually happened in New Jersey, is our sort of sister organization down there will be negotiating with the town about how they're going to get their fair share done. And the town will say, well, has the town down the road done it? And fair share, this group is able to say, yeah, actually, this is their number and here's their plan and they're getting it done. And that makes a huge difference to the first town that they're talking to.
So that would seem to me that if those of us, whatever regions we are in the Episcopal Church in Connecticut, if we all kind of collaborate and and get each of our towns that are neighboring each other, there's power in that, I think.
The Episcopal superpower, we got to activate it.
Are there a way for folks, maybe like the mailing list or anything like that, to get involved with that could be shared?
Yeah, I'll shoot the, now that we've created Growing Together, there's sort of these two ways to join. You can join OCA, has Open Communities Alliance has a coalition and a mailing list, all of that. And now we have sort of, in addition to that, this effort through Growing Together. So I'll put both up in the chat so you have it.
Thank you, Erin. That's great.
And do you work with Sustainable Connecticut?
Yeah, we know the folks over there, and I need to reach out to Alyssa and ask her if they want to join. And I haven't had a chance to do that. I've known her for years. And they've got a lot of great principles around, a lot of the environmental pieces, and that's sort of been the heart of what they've been working on. And we've been really grateful that they've added in some affordable housing pieces. And so we'd love to get them on board with the sort of the full fair share approach.
I just dropped our zoning for equity report in the chat. So I remember someone said they lived in Madison. You don't have to analyze all 300 pages of your zoning regulations if you live in one of these 12 towns, because I've already done it. So
Save yourself.
if you live in one of these towns, if you don't, we'll get to you eventually. It only took me about a year. But
And I didn't hear from Robert. Robert, where are you from in the state?
Washington.
Yeah, okay, great.
Well, that's that. This has been great. Thank you for your time, everybody, for being here, and for Erin and for Sam. I really look forward to continuing how we can get involved and see what other, parishes might want to get involved and whatnot, or regions and things like that. So I think there's really so much good stuff on the horizon, I hope. So I wonder if there's any final thoughts or anything that Erin or Sam might have for us. But yeah, thank you very, very much for this.
Dylan, we'll shoot you if it's okay. Maybe we can send you the information on the bill.
Yeah.
No need, this may be way too soon for anyone, so no pressure, but just so we'll send you information about when the hearing's on Thursday at noon, and testimony is due the day before, I think by 3 p.m. But I'm really grateful for all of you for being here and doing this work. I know it's Sunday night, and it's hard to get to a meeting on Sunday night sometimes. And so I just appreciate, and everyone's work on so many other areas is just blowing me away. So thanks for all that other work as well.
Thank you. This was
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks so much,
All
everyone.
right.
Take care.
thank you all.
Bye.
Have a good night.